could just get my career back on course, I'd only have the old standard worry left.
What's that?
Just can't seem to find the right man.
Maybe it's not a man you should be looking for.
You think I might find happiness in the animal kingdom, Ducky?
Like they say, Val, love's strange. We could always give it a try.
Okay. Let's go for it, Mr. Macho.
What do you mean? Okay, it was a joke. Listen, I'm pretty tired.
It's just that you're so incredibly soft and cuddly.
Bev, let's be realistic. I mean, my apartment's zillions of miles from here. You're 3 feet taller than I am.
I just can't resist your intense animal magnetism.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about the Katz of comic book movies, Howard the Duck, from 1986.
Oh yes.
I have seen it when I was a kid. I don't know if I told this on the podcast last week, but I definitely told you. I have one memory of it, which is when Bev pulls the condom out of his wallet, and I asked my babysitter, what's that? And he was like, I don't remember, he just like, he waved it off somehow, or he laughed it off somehow. He said, like, I can't tell you, or something.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, and I just wondered what that was for years and years. That was my main memory of this movie from
until this
30
week.
plus week. But it is the 50th anniversary of Howard the Duck. The cover date of his first appearance in Adventure to Fear 19 was in December of 73. So here we are. Pause the podcast.
No, don't bother.
Yeah, no, don't bother. Yeah.
Nothing important happens in this movie.
Yeah. Okay, so as I said, he first appeared in Adventure into Fear number 19, written by Steve Gerber, who was the writer. Adventure into Fear was a Man-Thing comic at the time. So Man-Thing was a Marvel character who was basically this giant hulking swamp creature.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
He actually, I think he appeared a few months before Swamp Thing.
Okay.
But I think those guys, Glenn Wayne and whoever created Man-Thing, they were roommates. And I think they were talking about this or something. There's some story, like, they came out around... There was another character called the Heap as well, which is the same thing. And they all kind of hit around the same time.
So is this a rare example of characters in comics that are similar and someone didn't rip off someone else?
Yes, it seems to be the case. And I think they were talking about, let's change this or something. There was a Man-Thing movie in 2005, so we will be covering that at some stage.
In 2005?
Yeah, in 2005 there was a Man-Thing movie. And also there was recently a Marvel Disney did a TV special of Werewolf by Night, and Man-Thing is in that, apparently. But we won't be touching that anymore.
So we won't be talking about Man-Thing now, then?
No, but we will be talking about Man-Thing.
We'll come back to
So
it.
anyway, Adventure into Fear was a reprint title, and then it became the, center... It was they were doing Man-Thing stories in there. So Man-Thing is this, as I said, this hulking swamp monster, and he can, sense fear or something like that, and if he touches you, your fear burns, or something like that.
It was very vague and odd. I didn't look up anything about the character because he's not really important. But yeah, he doesn't. He's completely silent.
Yes, he doesn't speak at all. Yeah,
he doesn't even seem to be aware.
Yeah.
It's apparently mindless. So this is an interesting character to base a comic book around.
Yeah.
A mindless monster that doesn't speak. And
I think he stumbles onto bad dudes, and when they're scared of him, and then he grabs them or they touch him, and then they burn.
Well, it's the characters that are around him, I suppose, that are important, and one of which is introduced in this volume.
So in this storyline, what happens is his swamp, it's revealed as a nexus point of realities because they're draining it to build an airport.
Yeah.
So this is why it's unleashed all this multi-dimensional chaos in the swamp, and all these
characters. The worlds are colliding. So right. Conan the Barbarian sort of characters are appearing alongside
demons
and World War II GIs.
Yeah, and we see there's funny animals in one corner when this concept's first introduced, and it says all the things that are fake in our world are real in their world, and all the things that are fake in their world is real. For us.
In our world or in another world.
Yeah.
Which is a line that makes it intact into the film, I noticed.
Surprisingly, yeah. So it's this big mashup of all these things, and suddenly in the middle of the issue you get this talking duck waddles out of a bush. Just because Steve Gerber, the writer, needed a bit of shock at that moment, so he was a throwaway kind of moment.
The concept is it's a sort of like Moorcock Eternal Champion kind of situation where Swamp Thing, Man Thing, has his sort of like champions that surround him as he resolves whatever this situation is. Like some evil wizard has to be killed or something, whatever. And it's one of them is like a Conan type character who speaks in kind of Robert Howard sort of prose, and another is this scantily clad woman who's a wizard's apprentice, and the third is Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
Although Howard the Duck ends up falling off a...
I thought there were 5, and then there's Man Thing.
Man Thing too, and the wizard himself.
Oh right, that's right.
And then the good wizard.
This is like 2 or 3 issue storyline, then Howard falls off like a space bridge.
Before the big denouement, before the big final confrontation, Howard just dies.
Into another universe. They're like, we got to get rid of this guy. He's no use.
At that point, there was no clue that he'd survived. They just said he died by falling off into the void.
Yeah. I do think that Barbarian Dude comes back later on in
a Howard the Duck.
In a Howard Duck comic later on.
Because to jump ahead, Howard is Howard gets his own comic after this, doesn't he?
Yeah, so Steve Gerber was an interesting writer at Marvel. He's a bit different from those other guys that at that era in the 70s that we talked about, they were kind of... Those guys had grown up on the 60s Marvel comics, so they loved those comics and they came in and that's all they cared to write about. And of course, when we get to the 80s, they've consumed what the guys from the 70s consumed from the 60s, so you're just down this chain of regurgitation. But Gerber was a little bit different. I think he did grow up reading that stuff or whatever, but he just had a slightly different mindset about these things. He wasn't as beholden to obsessing about continuity and stuff like that.
Certainly not.
So he was writing this. He was writing Defenders, which was like a team book with Doctor Strange and Valkyrie and Nighthawk and the Hulk.
Okay.
It was just a super. They show up in an issue of Howard later on.
I did notice that. Yeah.
So he was writing that, and then he introduced another character that he was also probably most famous for, which was Omega the Unknown, who was introduced in Defenders. Am I getting this right? And then he had his own series of like 10 or 12 issues, and then they had to resolve his storyline, Defenders. But anyway, Gerber became most known for Howard. Howard became his thing.
Yes.
So we get two more appearances. So Val Mayerik, who's drawing these Man Thing appearances, is kind of a journeyman artist. But then we get 2 stories drawn by Frank Brunner, which appeared in the most unfortunately named comic book of all time, Giant Size Man Thing, issues 4 and 5. And those are really...
So awesomely named comic book.
Yeah, those are really great comics. Those are 2 shorts, very beautifully drawn realistically by Frank Brunner. Then we get his own... Howard gets his own series.
Yeah.
Page 1 of his own series, he's trying to kill himself. Amazing. I was like, holy cow, what a way to start the show.
Yeah.
And then Brunner draws that series for, I think, 3 issues, and then Gene Colan takes over from issue 4, and he draws almost every issue of Howard after that. He was doing Tomb of Dracula at the same time. So he's doing both series, which is, I guess, a thing these workhorses from the 70s were capable of.
Yeah.
Then there was a newspaper strip.
Yeah, I heard about that. I didn't read anything about it.
Well, there was a couple of years of the strip. There's some... Well, we'll talk about the... It was apparently more restrictive than the comic because it was for a really mass audience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because the comic is really...
So Gerber was felt restrained by the comic's code, but he was even more restrained in the newspaper strip. But there was an interesting storyline where Bev inherits a massage parlor, which turns out to be a front for a nursing home.
What?
Yeah, because these old folks are protected from being harassed or all sorts of crap that society puts at them because they're hiding behind this massage.
This is in a newspaper.
It was a newspaper. I think Gerber said they got complaints about using the word massage parlor from some editors.
I dare say.
But what happened was he got fired from the newspaper strip for some reason. I'm not sure what that reason was, but contractually, apparently Marvel were not supposed... Part of their deal was they could not fire Steve Gerber from the newspaper strip. They fired him. They stuck Marv Wolfman on there, who also wrote some of the post-Gerber Howard the Duck comic book stuff.
I noticed he was the editor for the some of those early Man-Thing stories and the early Howard the Duck stories.
And then Gerber ended up editing himself, which is a thing that happened on some Marvel titles. I think even Wolfman was editing himself on Tomb of Dracula. But where was it going? So he got fired. So he sued Marvel. And Marvel's response was immediately to fire him from the Howard the Duck comic book, the color comic book series. And they also then, after a few issues they canceled Howard the Duck as a comic, and then they relaunched it as a black and white magazine, which is another thing they were trying to do at the time because they were trying to compete with Warren magazines. So they had a few of those. Of course, they did the Dracula one and a few others like that, Savage Sword of Conan. So Gerber tried to sue. Apparently they settled or something. I don't know what the deal was. I was very surprised to see his name in the credits of the movie, actually. And then, much like Marv Wolfman, who tried to sue Marvel at one stage and then ended up working for them, Gerber was working for them again. Like, he wrote some She-Hulk comics, which Howard appeared in. Then he wrote a Marvel Max series, I think in 2001, which I haven't read, but in which Howard is now a mouse. By the way, also Marvel, at some stage Disney came in and tried to sue or put a cease and desist on Howard and demanded that he wear pants. Because otherwise he was too much like Donald the Duck. Donald the Duck.
Yeah.
Donald the Duck.
Donald the Duck. Howard the Duck. Donald the Duck. I see why I did that.
Yeah. So what was... Oh, the other thing, just briefly to mention before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, was that Gerber did a kidnapping of Howard. A real-life kidnapping. Because he was doing some story for Savage Dragon, which was Eric Larson's Image comic. And he had something where these characters that were like Howard and Bev show up, and then they get cloned, and then in Marvel, Spider-Man or somebody meets like Howard and Bev in a car, in an alley or in a parking garage, and they're in the shadows, and then he leaves with them. But then it was revealed that he left with clones, if you read like the Savage Dragon side. So the Howard that's in Marvel Comics, supposedly, according to Steve Gerber,
is a clone.
He's a clone. It's not the real Howard. The real Howard is now Leonard the Duck, living in independent comics land.
Yeah, this makes sense. This seems very Steve Gerber.
Yeah. So we've talked about how he appeared, and then he started. He's stuck on Earth, and his life's miserable. So he's going, I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah. So when he fell into the void, he's landed on the Marvel Earth.
Yeah.
616 or whatever it's called.
Yes. Yeah. 616. Yeah. That is absolutely worthy of the bell. So then he has these wacky adventures, these two short stories, one with a man frog and one with a hell cow, which is this vampire.
The hell cow is my favourite. So it's a cow that got bitten by Dracula.
Yeah.
So Dracula was flying through rural Europe and was thirsty and couldn't find any humans, so he just snacked on a cow. And the cow came back from the dead.
Yeah.
And has since, for the centuries since, apparently, been pursuing Dracula to take revenge on him for turning her into a vampire cow. Meantime, draining human beings in turn to sustain her on life, which is such a whacked out concept.
Yeah. And this seems to be Gerber's approach. So almost every issue there's some kooky villain.
Yeah.
Which I think Garth Ennis has based half his career on this, really. Is just like really oddball heroes and villains.
Yeah. Yes. So it's always... And it's something very wacky.
Yeah.
Oddball is a good word. So like the Hellcat, there's also the Turnip Man.
Yes.
Who and his origin is just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's... A telepathic turnip lands in his backyard.
From space, yeah.
From space, which was originally enormous, but was ablated down to a turnip size by its passage through Earth's atmosphere. It's super intelligent and is millions of years old, but is tired of being a disembodied consciousness in a turnip and wants a body. So it cuts a deal with this frustrated artist to give him the power... the psychic power to live out his fantasies of being active and a superhero, and in turn will gain access to his body. And so he wears a purple costume. No, is it a green costume, which is sort of feathery, like a turnip's top, and a purple turnip helmet.
Yeah.
And he's described in one of the captions as a garden fresh guardian of the good.
Yeah.
There's another thing about Steve Gerber is that his prose is really funny.
Yeah.
So he takes these, I suppose, comic cliches or comic tropes of using alliteration or using purple prose and ratchets it up another notch. It makes it really funny. There's another line which I wrote down, which comes from Howard's confrontation with the Hell Cow, which is, the Hell Cow hurls herself at her target, but misses. Her cold, unmilkable udder barely... So it's like comic book prose, but also unmilkable udder.
Yeah.
I'll start again, sorry. The Hell Cow hurls herself at her target, but misses. Her cold, unmilkable udder barely brushing Howard's feathery crown.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So in issue 1, I think this is the issue where he's trying to kill himself, and then he stops for some reason. He can't do it. Interestingly, he's trying to kill himself by drowning himself in the swamp, and he's a duck. So
he can't swim though.
He
right?
can't swim.
Is that established here? It's established at some point that he can't swim.
And he can't fly. We never see
No, he can't fly either.
He definitely falls because he falls to his death off that bridge.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning. But he stumbles across this tower, this sheer tower.
It's made of credit cards.
Made out of credit cards. There's a parody of the glass tower scaling from Conan the Barbarian, I think, is what's happening here.
Okay.
And he scales the sheer tower made of credit cards, and he fights this wizard up there called Pro Rata, the mad financial wizard.
Pro Rata.
And he is imprisoned this girl,
the mad financial wizard.
who it turns out to be Beverly. And once he rescues her, she's just like an ordinary girl named Beverly Switzler, and she is sometimes is an artist model to earn a few bucks here and there. It's a common thread that they don't have money or a job or food. Like, how are we going to get food?
Yeah.
How are we going to... Do I have to get a job?
Howard wants to join... At one point, Howard wants to join the police force. That's why he hunts down and kills the Hell Cow, because he's hoping to impress...
That's before, yeah.
Yeah, he's hoping...
That's right.
He's hoping to impress the local cops.
Yeah.
Who have, in an earlier scene, arrested him and attempted to find the zipper on his duck suit, which of course he doesn't have. A scene that also makes
Interestingly, later, he gets a job as a security guard, and he's like, I feel uncomfortable being in a position of authority. So the character kind of shifts in a very short period of time to something else.
Well, it's a bit... I don't think... If you're looking for consistency, you're probably not going to find it in this comic.
No. Yeah, I think that's...
It's...
I do think Gerber settles in pretty quickly into Howard being an outsider that is able to look at what's happening in 1973, 4, 5, 6 America and going, people are going crazy for these kung fu movies and beating each other on the street. Yeah.
And he's really anti-kung fu movies. And contemptuous of all these people doing kung fu moves. Yeah. And then he becomes a kung fu
And Marvel was
master.
publishing Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, Shang-Chi, like all those comics at that same time. So he's like making fun of the comics.
If it's not clear yet, this comic is very satirical.
Yes.
It's a satire.
Yeah, and there's a hefty amount of social commentary.
Yes.
Especially, they end up going to New York. Why did they decide to go? But they end up getting roped into this political party, which is called the All Night Party. And they end up getting jobs working for them, which is where he was a security guard. Yep. Bev ends up being like a hostess at the convention because they're having their convention. And Howard ends up getting recruited to be like candidate for president.
Yeah, he becomes presidential candidate.
He becomes presidential candidate. We have a few issues of this. Apparently, according to Stan Lee, Howard was getting thousands of write-in votes in the 76 election.
Love it.
When it was Ford Carter. So those badges were actually going around. They actually made those buttons that were drawn by Bernie Wrightson of Howard the Duck for President.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of commentary in there. Now, there's a question of how hamstrung was he by the code?
I'm sure
Is it not really... I mean, is it biting commentaries or just commentary? When I last read these comics 15 years ago, 2008, right after Steve Gerber died, Obama was coming in, I was like, these aren't really hard enough. These are like softballs. Reading it this time, I felt like this is pretty good, actually. I felt like there was enough sharpness to it.
Yeah.
Now, there's a certain amount of... Some stuff is... Like, he parodies the Moonies at one stage, which is maybe dated.
The Yuckies.
The Yuckies, yeah.
Reverend Moon Yuck.
Yeah.
And his followers are called the Yuckies.
Yes. And it's like, okay, maybe, and later on there's a satire of Anita Bryant, but then we also get parody stuff. There's like a Star Wars parody that happens later down the line, where he tried to make it kind of about the commercialism of it, like the Death Star is called a Death Store, and stuff like that. So I'm not sure how biting it is, but I did find it really funny this time going through.
Yep.
Somehow I'd completely forgotten the 2 Canada issues, which I thought were hilarious. And they meet this Mountie, and there's this beaver there's this guy that he unleashed all these beavers on Niagara Falls to try to redirect it to the Canadian side, but the funny thing is that the nice side of the falls is the Canadian side already. It was such a great little in-joke there. And all sorts of stuff like that, and I was like, wow, this is all really good stuff, and the super villain stuff, and all the weirdness of it was, maybe I don't know why I didn't laugh as hard as last time, but this time I thought, like, this is really weird, strange
I also found it
stuff.
Strange. It's an eclectic mixture.
Yeah.
Like, he has different targets, not a lot of consistency. It's fanciful at times.
Yep.
But I think, nonetheless, it has a continuum of, how its character, because he's kind of like he's sort of like a Groucho Marx kind of character. I mean, he has the cigar.
Yes, absolutely.
And he's waddling around, much like Groucho Marx, and making all kinds of wry observations and sharp witticisms.
I love it. There's one where he finds a, Daffy Duck comic. It's not called Daffy Duck, but it's obviously Daffy Duck. And he's so offended by it, he calls it reactionary propaganda, is how he describes it.
I think Gerber was doing his best with the limitations he had.
Yeah.
Because what this reminded me of, I think most out of the comics that we've read for the podcast, is probably the Flaming Carrot.
Yeah.
But the Flaming Carrot is much less disciplined, much sillier, and the Flaming Carrot himself is much less interesting as a character, because Flaming Carrot's just sort of brain damaged and stumbles around saying, "Ut!" Whereas Howard has this distinct characterization, and he's always making these observations about the things he's seeing.
Yeah.
And also the writing is really funny too. Yeah. It's skewering these comic writing conventions, but also taking advantage of them to say really funny things.
Yeah.
I think it's really clever. And
I think he did really well with the limitations that he had. There's by the way, Gerber also wrote the Kiss comic book that came out from Marvel, which was a big deal at the time. Sold like 500,000 copies. It was huge numbers. But then Kiss show up in Howard the Duck later on. The band show, but they're never called Kiss, but it's obviously Kiss. I don't know how he got away with it exactly.
Amazing.
But there was almost like a little Gerberverse happening, because Howard meets the Defenders in a special issue in here. It's really funny. They're walking around New York. It's in between the 2 election issues, and Bev says, "What a weird place. Everybody looks like Al Pacino." So the Defenders and Omega the Unknown and Man-Thing and Howard and Kiss were all kind of all existing in this little Gerberverse that he was playing in. Very, very rarely see the other...
Howard was a clone of himself.
Yeah, yeah. You very rarely see other Marvel... Except there's a funny panel in that interdimensional battle where Daredevil and Black Widow swing through by accident because the portal's open for 2 panels, and then swing out the other side. They accidentally rescue Howard before he falls, or somebody before they fall to their death or something.
And then just vanish.
Never mentioned again.
Vanish stage left.
Yeah.
And they're not mentioned again. And I think Spider-Man shows up
Spider-Man does show up in very early, issue
I think
1
when he's still finding...
Yeah,
the very first issue with the Financial Wizard.
Yeah.
And then I suppose when the comic's still sort of finding its feet at that point.
Yeah. And the other line that I wrote down from... this from the newspaper strip, this is line, is... Cleveland, Ohio, where men are men and discriminating women, such as Beverly Switzler, prefer ducks. Conclude what you will.
Perfect. Perfect.
And I don't know if we need to go into too much more.
No, I think that covers it.
Yeah.
I think we can move on to the film now.
Okay. 1986.
Yes.
Boy, we get a credit that says based on the Marvel Comics character created by Steve Gerber. So we start out on it looks like ordinary apartment, empty, but all the posters on the wall are like duck puns.
Yep.
So for example...
There's a Splash Dance poster.
Splash Dance.
Throwing...
Rolling Stone is Rolling Egg. There's a W.C. Fields one, and Mae West. What's that movie? It's actually got a animal... like a duck title in it, but she's like May Nest. Everything's like this.
Yep.
Everything that we have on Earth has exact analog.
Except with the duck.
Except it's a duck.
Except it's a pun.
It's a duck and a duck pun. The person is a duck, and there's a duck pun somewhere in the poster. We see from a postcard that Howard's name is actually Howard T. Duck, and he lives in Washington, D.C. I want you to bear all these things in mind as we go further into the movie and try to unravel this thing. Because I think every shot of this movie, I was like, what is going on? Okay, so Howard comes home.
We don't see him at first.
He's in shadows. He opens his fridge. Looks like he's got frogs in there.
I didn't see that. He's got beers, which
yeah, okay.
called Birdwisers.
Right. Oh, Jesus. Okay. There's a lot of, especially the first 5 minutes of the movie. He turns on his TV, flips through channels, everything is ducks. It's people, all your regular human TV shows, but everything's replaced by ducks and duck puns.
Yep.
He starts reading Play Duck magazine on his easy chair, like sitting in front of the TV. Then suddenly there's a rumbling. Oh, he gets calls. There's calls from like girls. Like there's messages on his answering machine from different girls. And then the postcard he got is from some girl as well, so apparently he's got a lot of girls on the go. Apparently, also there's a poster that says it's like a band, and it's like Howard and the Heartbreakers, maybe, yeah. Suddenly there's a rumble, and he's zipped through some sort of space portal.
His chair is yanked through his apartment.
Through the apartment,
so he goes through about 6 or 7 walls and passes some other ducks, including an unpleasant shot of a duck in the bath.
A lady duck with breasts.
With breasts.
So these ducks are mammals?
I don't even want to. Just don't even bother. Yeah, she's got non-mammalian memories.
Yeah.
And these are bare breasts as well.
Bare breasts.
Is a pretty sleazy kind of.
This is the first like 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
So he sucked through his apartment up into space, goes through space. Then we get the opening scroll, which says there are all these different realities, a bit like in the comic.
Yes.
And where our fantasies are realities in other places, but mind you, this line doesn't make any sense as we get further into the movie. And we learn that it isn't a different reality, it's just another planet.
It's just another planet. So I didn't really think that through.
Crash lands on Earth.
In an alley.
He lands in his another chair in the alley, and then he's suddenly surrounded by 80s punks. And these punks grab Howard. They don't comment on him being a duck or anything. No. They grab him and they shove him into the hands of this guy who's at the entrance to a nightclub and shove him into his hands and say, now you can get in Poindexter or something like that, like this nerdy guy. Now I'm like, I have so many questions about this. So there's some nerd, let's backtrack, there's some nerd who can't get into a club because he doesn't have a date.
Yeah.
So these guys found a sentient duck in an alley, these punks, and they give that to the nerd. What's their relationship to this guy that they need him to get into this club? I don't understand. Why were they waiting around looking to pick up anybody that they could give to the nerd to get into? Why do they care? Okay.
Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any sense. We go in there, then we see the band on stage. Lea Thompson is the lead singer. The band looks very much like Gem and the Holograms or something like that. Apparently all those songs are by Thomas Dolby. Were written by Thomas Dolby.
So, yes, they were.
And the score was written by John Barry. You could have fooled me.
There was, yes. The songs for the band is called Cherry Bomb.
Yes.
Yes, they're by Thomas Dolby, and also someone called Ali Willis also worked on the songs as well.
Okay.
I only know that because there's a pretty good quote from Ali Willis that I pulled off the internet, which I'll return to later on.
We should, but it's good you brought that up because we should talk a little bit about some of the credits. So, when the opening credits happen, George Lucas presents.
Yes.
Like right across the screen.
Well, that's one thing that everybody knows about this film, I think.
Yes.
Just that George Lucas...
But his credit is actually executive producer, and often executive producers don't have much to do with the movie at all. Sometimes they only sell the rights.
No.
But he did go to film school with Gloria Katz and William Huyck.
William Huyck is the director.
Yes.
And Gloria Katz and Willard Huyck wrote the script together.
Yes. And Huyck had previously written American Graffiti.
That's right.
And Temple of Doom, which Gloria Katz had also co-written.
That's correct.
And they were married. They got married around this time.
And Gloria Katz is also sort of infamous for polishing the draft for Star Wars: A New Hope.
Oh, okay.
So taking it from whatever mess George Lucas had started with, and being one of the people that made A New Hope from a certain flop into the massive film that it was.
Right. None of those fingerprints are on here.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So Okay, so they also made a movie called Messiah of Evil in 1974, which is apparently, like, interesting. I haven't seen it. A horror movie? I haven't... Anyway, I've heard good and bad things about it, but it's on my list of, like, movies I want to see, and I had no idea it was these two. Okay, so... We go into the bar. Howard runs away, I think, or he runs out of there.
Yeah.
He accidentally feels up a woman in an alley who's making out with some dude. That dude attacks him. He runs away. He's chased by these bikers called Satan's Sluts, this all-girl biker gang. And then they knock him into a garbage can, and he says, talk about a bad day. Now, he's in another universe. Like, he's on another planet. He's surrounded by beings. There's no he doesn't seem to react to this.
Well, he can't
Much like
react
the punks didn't react to him being a talking duck.
So this sequence, I could think I know what they were trying to do with it, what it was supposed to be.
Okay.
It's supposed to be one of those bewildering psychedelic sequences where a character is introduced into a new world.
Yeah.
And they stumble from place to place, and they're just being figures loom out of the darkness, terrify them, and they bounce like a pinball from spot to spot. Maybe the only thing I can think of off the top of my head would be the sequence in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where the heroine first discovers that the pirates are zombie pirates. And she's sort of flung around the ship, and skeletal pirates sort of pop up in front of her constantly.
Yes.
But it doesn't work at all because, as you pointed out, some of the people are behaving in ways. First of all,
Throughout the movie, some people are like, "Oh, it's a kid in a suit."
Yeah.
As soon as
no one reacts to him in a consistent fashion.
And some people are like, "Ah!" Like the woman in the alley just screams, like, "What? Christ! What is that thing?"
This scene goes too long. We really needed maybe Howard's point of view for it to make sense. We needed to see. I think we do briefly get it when he's in the recliner when he first crashes and he's looking up at the punks. And they're looming over him. But from then on...
But he never says, like, what are you? Or anything like that.
It's really...
Or where am I?
This scene does not work. I completely agree with you. It's too long. Howard doesn't behave or react in a way that you'd expect him to, which I think is partly crap direction, and partly because the puppet only has so many expressions too.
I think the puppet's decent, actually.
Yeah.
I think they get some... Like, the bill moves a little bit enough you get some expression out of it.
It does, but it's just not... It's not enough.
But I think that's a line. That's a line of dialogue. Where am I? Who are these people? And it doesn't happen.
Yes. And then he goes to sleep in the garbage can.
Well, he's in the garbage can, and then Beverly, the Lea Thompson character,
with amazing 80s hair.
Yeah, I also want to point out that she is in an episode of Tales from the Crypt, and she did play a cartoonist on 4 seasons of Caroline in the City. So
God,
she's kind of honorary all-star of some sort.
All-star.
Yeah. This is the year after Back to the Future.
That's right.
As well.
Within a year of it.
Yeah.
So not 12 months hasn't passed.
Yeah. Remind me for the trivia about the casting of that part too. You've probably got it there.
I'm not sure, but
okay.
I will.
So she's leaving the club and then she's attacked. She's sexually assaulted throughout the movie. I want to point out in the comic there are 2 moments when they're coming to the convention. They get picked up by this country western musician who is staring at her breasts, and there's a really obvious panel. I'm surprised he got away with it with the code. But it's this leering panel. That's the point. And then after her first day at the convention, Howard's like, "How's your day?" And she's like, "My butt's sore because it's been pinched so much." And I'm like, these are commentaries. But here it's just like, no, she's just attacking Alibad's guy. Yep. These guys, Howard comes out, he does quack fu on them, which is...
No one laughs at a master of quack fu.
He does do quack fu in the comic, but there's a whole issue about it. It's about the quack fu.
Yes.
It's a parody of
Kung
the
Fu
Kung Fu
movies,
TV series.
where he learns Kung Fu in 20 minutes.
Yeah. He beats the crap out of these guys. Try to remember that too for the other fights that come up in the movie. He's able to easily dispose of these guys.
Yes.
Bev kind of freaks out that he's ducked. She's like, "What are you?" And he's like, "Oh, what is this place?" And she's like, "Cleveland." He's like, "What planet's that?" "Well, you're from Marshington, D.C. So there must be some Featherland or something where you're from. Like, I don't understand why he can't understand what the name of the city is."
Yeah.
Okay, so she just explained that it's a city. Then they're going to go their separate ways, but it's raining. He doesn't like the rain. I'm like, "You're a duck. This is weird." Okay, so she decides, you want to come back to my place? They go back to her place. I think it's at this stage he tells her that he went to med school.
Yes. He dropped out of med school.
Dropped out of med school. He wanted to be a musician and he failed. He had a poster in his apartment that was Howard and the Heartbreakers, which looked like they were doing okay.
Yep.
Was that even him on the cover of Rolling Egg, maybe? I wasn't sure about that.
Well, all the ducks are the same
They're
because
all
they're
the
all the
same.
same costume.
So it's very hard for me to tell. But anyway,
Yes.
I wasn't sure. But at this stage, you're like, oh, this movie's... And she's like, yeah, our manager keeps taking our money and we're trying to make it. I'm like, this is going to be a make it in the biz movie.
You always do this.
Yes.
And you're always
I'm always wrong. That's not what this movie is about. It's not about making it in the music biz.
Nope.
He passes out. He's like, he's so tired. She goes to his wallet. All the cards are like duck parody cards. There's like, I can't remember what the names of the cards are. They're so stupid. But then
Mallard card or
something like
that. MasterCard.
Yes,
just all
exactly,
dumb
stuff
puns,
like that. And then she pulls out the condom. Now, I'd remembered the condom. What I did not remember was that it is a loose condom.
Yeah, it's not in a wrapper. It's an unrolled condom.
Why?
And it's a teeny tiny condom too.
Why does he have a loose condom in his wallet? My mind is blown. What is the logic here? Did they think we wouldn't know what it was if it was in the wrapper? And her reaction is, oh, Howard.
Instead of gross.
Yeah, gross, a loose condom.
No, oh, Howard. This was just so mind-boggling to me that this is what
Here's our question. Here's a question too. Who is this movie for? We've had naked boobs.
Question.
We've had a condom. But meanwhile, in the alley when she's attacked, and those guys see the duck, that guy, one of the punks says, "I've had too much toot today." Too much toot, or something like that. Like what?
Isn't that cocaine or something?
I guess. But is this movie so G-rated that they couldn't say cocaine or pot or dope?
You're right. So at this point, it seems like it's some sort of adult. It's like Fritz the Cat or something.
Yeah.
It's some sort of raunchy comedy.
Yes.
At this point, but it's going to this tone will change.
Yeah.
This film does not have a consistent tone.
Yeah.
But this is really sleazy. The condom in the wallet, the unrolled condom, and it's tiny.
Yeah. By the way, ducks have corkscrew-shaped penises.
I thought of that.
And corkscrew vaginas.
Yeah, I thought
the
about
opposite way. So
shouldn't the condom have been
I don't know,
the
but these
shape
are
of a
mammals.
corkscrew?
These are mammal ducks. They're not actual ducks.
I don't think they are supposed to be mammal ducks.
Actually, that's right, because he's offended by the thought of eating eggs later, even though they're chicken eggs.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's it. They're not duck eggs.
I don't get it.
I remember thinking that too. Why does he hate eggs so much?
Okay, so Bev has a friend who's a scientist. So the next day, she takes him to this lab to show to this person that she knows, because later on, he comes backstage at their show. They know him well enough that
he's dating one of her co-stars.
Okay.
Co-stars. One of her band members.
One of her band members.
Yeah, they're dating.
So they go in. It's Tim Robbins, a young, early Tim Robbins.
Almost his very first film role. I think it's only his second.
Okay. But it was the same year as Top Gun, and then Bull Durham was like 2 years later. So he's about to... Him and Lea Thompson's career survived this movie, which I feel blessed for.
I think... Yeah, we can talk about that a bit more later. But none of the actors paid a price for appearing in this film.
Yeah. Okay, so they go to this museum. There's a laboratory in the museum, which I think is a bit weird. But then she learned... Look, he sees Howard... Well, they go into a room with Howard where he is. We don't see what happens. Tim Robbins bolts out of there. He goes to the board of directors of the museum. They're in a room with a giant dinosaur skull on the table. And then he's like, I gotta tell you something. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna tell you. And he walks out. I'm like, why did this happen? He goes back.
Why?
He decides he's gonna examine Howard. He doesn't realize that he's intelligent at this stage.
Yeah.
Then he realizes it.
There's a kind of goofy scene where Howard, he's trying to get Howard to use laser vision.
Yeah.
He talks to him in baby talk or caveman talk. Me, Tim. His character's name's not Tim, but I forget what it is. Filzy. That's it. He's Filzy. That's what Howard calls him. And it's sort of just a chance for Howard to deliver these flat, which are supposed to be wry kind of observations or lines. I suppose Groucho Marx-esque kind of wisecracks, but they're always really flat.
Oh, they're so bad. There are no jokes in this movie.
No.
They're attempted jokes.
Yeah.
I laughed a lot, but not ever because of what they were intending.
Just because of how terrible it was.
Yeah.
Tim Robbins' performance is fine as this nutty professor-like character. But this scene just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Why is he behaving this way?
Yeah. Yep. So they decide to leave. He's
it turns out
following
he's
them
the
out.
lab assistant, not
That's right. Why didn't Beverly know this? Like, and he says, when I finish school, I'm going to get my own museum. Is that how that works?
Of course not, because he's an idiot.
Yeah, well, even when anybody finishes school, do they get a museum? Anyway, so they leave. Beverly and Howard kind of give up on this guy because they figure he's a fraud. I thought she knew who he was. I guess not. They figure he's a fraud.
There's an okay scene where Tim Robbins' character tells us where Howard came from.
Oh yeah, evolution explains evolution. Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. So we got the descent of that famous image of the descent of man, where you start with the chimp and you go through Homo neanderthalensis, the ascent of man, and Homo neanderthalensis all the way up to Cro-Magnon man, etc., etc. Not accurate anymore, but it's an image that everyone's familiar with.
Yeah.
And we get a similar one, lights up on the museum display, except it's the ascent of duck.
Yes. From egg. By the way, their planet was egg-shaped. Anyway, so outside, Howard has lost, and he's like, he doesn't want to have anything to do with Beverly anymore. I'm like, why is that? Because he's been here one night and he's giving up on ever going home because of this one...
Well, they have a fight. He's angry at her for putting him in a plastic bag and dragging him to a nut bar. But as
you're going to try to make it on your own. You're an alien being in this world. It's bizarre.
The pacing is just all off.
And she... Yeah, I was like, this is the middle of the second act breakup. Like, why is this happening at the beginning of the movie? Anyway, he goes off. He's like, I got no job, no work, much like in the comic. But this is like at the first. He just arrived. He's been there less than a day.
Yeah.
And he's like, I got to get a job. So he goes into literally an unemployment office.
Yes.
And this actress is actually pretty good.
Yeah. So he's given to the hard case. Lady, the woman who will find you. So she assumes that he's a guy. Well, it's actually kind of...
What does she assume? Does she assume he's does she know he's a duck?
She doesn't even...
She doesn't acknowledge it at all.
I'm having to bite my tongue because I don't even know if this is the right time to bring this up.
Okay.
But there's a novelization of this film.
Shoot, do it.
This novelization is by Ellie Wiener, who also wrote a Dune parody.
Yeah.
He wrote Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. For National Lampoon. Both for National Lampoon.
Yes. So, and he was editor at National Lampoon. And this novelization is the best movie novelization I've ever read.
Okay.
It's so fantastic. And so first of all, this novelization fixes a lot of these continuity problems from the film, because we get a lot of fix-ups, a lot of context, which he's invented, incidentally. Because he's just... Which, Ellie Wiener has just invented stuff to make this more bearable. Where at the same time, whenever something happens that he can't explain, he just pokes fun at it in this novel.
Right. So he has an explanation for the employment officer.
Yeah, so, So in the film, Howard is wearing children's clothing.
Yes.
Which is all he could get from an op shop. We never explained how he got clothes from an op shop.
Yeah.
In the book, in the novelization, it's explained that he buys it with his Duckworld money.
Okay.
And the cashier in the op shop is so completely disinterested. Another amazing thing about this novelization is we get pages and pages and pages of background on characters that appear for like a frame.
Okay.
And there are these brilliant insets where... I imagine I read an electronic copy, but I imagine in the novelization they appear in a bordered section of the book, maybe in a different font, that will go on for 5 or 6 or 7 pages, and will be about the books that Howard read as a child.
Wow.
A pop psychological analysis of Howard, or about the nexus of Somnia, where the Dark Overlords, the antagonists of the film, come from. There's like a 5-page bit all in this high-concept science fiction language about what it's like there. It's not just a prison for these Dark Overlords like in Superman, but it's also a retirement village for rich, non-corporeal aliens. And this section is written like a brochure for an exclusive resort community, except with all this high-concept sci-fi terminology. It's really, really funny.
Okay.
Like, don't watch this movie.
Read the book.
But read this book.
Okay.
It's genius. Anyway, sorry to get back to... I'm going to start jumping in now whenever we come to a scene.
Yep.
He bought it with his Duckworld money, and the distracted cashier didn't even look...
Yeah, because the money's got ducks on it instead of presidents.
It's got George Washington Duck or something.
Yeah. Marshington.
Yeah, George Marshington.
Yeah.
And it's called the United States of something like the Latin name for ducks is there. I forget what it is, but it's similar enough to America that it's fine. And then he's gone to the employment office, and then he's encountered some... So we get an expanded scene in the book. He's encountered some people... This has nothing to do with the film. But he encounters people at a desk, and they just look at him and they think he's a kid in a suit, or a man in a suit. And they just think, oh, great, a wacko. We got a wacko, guys. You know what we do with the wackos? This to Howard. We know what we do with the wackos? We send you up to Bertha, or whatever her name is. She'll take care of you.
Okay, gotcha.
And she's the person that gets the hard cases.
Okay.
And incidentally, in the novelization scene, she doesn't even make eye contact with him. Because she knows, she gets these people in, and they all have a hard luck story. Yeah. She's the one that cracks down on the people who are trying to collect welfare.
Yes.
And she finds them a job no matter what.
Okay, here's my thing about it. He's not there to collect welfare. He wants to work.
But she doesn't know or care.
So,
because anyone who works in her door has been...
Well, you're talking about the book, but
that's right.
I'm saying in the movie, there's no reason for her to be so hard on him, because he wants to work.
That's right.
And then she turns around, and he is fantasizing about biting her ass. There's a long lingering
shot. So gross.
And I'm like, why are you trying to attack her? She's getting you a job, and she's good at her job. She gets him a job immediately.
Straight away.
At a brothel, the weirdest brothel on earth must be, or in Cleveland at least. It's this weird, like every room has a spa.
Yep.
And he's been sent there to work on the water pipes and stuff like that. I think she knows he's a doc.
Yeah. Well, that's a throwaway line later, but yeah, his main job seems to be to bring towels to all the...
But also to fix pipes. So he's like in charge of washing, because that involves water and pipes.
He says, you're the water expert I asked the job agency to, so fix the water. And that's when he says, I can't swim.
Yes. And then he says he can't swim, and then he quits. And then we get this, to me, was the funniest shot of the movie, is him walking down the street sadly. He's walking down the streets of Cleveland, he's totally depressed, he's got no job. Again, this is maybe 12 hours later, I don't know, since he arrived, but he's so down in the dumps, and it's hilarious seeing this duck walking around, depressed on the street. There's no other people, I guess, on the street. Nobody's commenting. He's not... What about the science of appearing in another world? Or like another dimension or something? And why isn't there any reaction to this? All he cares about is his work and money. It's so bizarre. There's no fish out of water thing happening.
No,
here.
You're right. There is no fish out of water thing happening.
He's just moved to another town. Or something like... Not even that. I don't know what it is. Just this guy doesn't have a job. In fact, because he can't swim, and later we learn he can't fly.
Yep.
Which I guess is the same in the comic, but I'm like, well, why is he a duck? Why put a duck in the movie? There's nothing specific to being a duck that's specific to this movie at all. If you know what I mean.
Well, not really, Kumar.
I mean, there's no duck-related powers or anything that make it... Well, that movie has to be about a duck, because he's gonna swim and fly and lay eggs. You know what I mean?
But, yeah. Okay. Then what happens?
So then he goes back to... He ends up accidentally back in the alley where he first arrived.
He
goes across to the bar where...
He goes to look for...
where Beverly's playing.
Yeah.
She's playing with her band, the Cherry Bomb. Now, she happens to bump into her manager.
Howard does. Howard bumps into the manager.
Now, the manager has been stealing money from Bev and the band, not paying them, because she told us that in that earlier scene.
I promise I won't do this much anymore, but we get a whole bit about the manager in the novelization. We get a scene that doesn't exist in the film.
Okay.
Where, it establishes much more clearly that they have a contract with him that they can't break. Because
she says something.
And also, he's filthy rich. He's driving around in a limo with white leather seats.
Okay, well, this guy's more of a sleazebag.
Yes.
And one of his buddies is the guy that stole Ferris Bueller's car. Anyway, Howard gets into a bar fight with these guys and takes the money. Now, here's another crazy thing. He takes the money that he had stolen from Bev, that the manager had stolen from Bev, but the guy has all the money from all their gigs, apparently, that he carries around with him in cash. And he says he was going to pay after Bev puts out. That's his big plan. Why would you carry all the money? Why not have that night's money?
Are we sure it was all the money ever?
I don't know, because he never gets any more money from him. Because once he finally gives it to him, he doesn't for several scenes. Howard's got the money. He doesn't say, here's your money. He waits a very long time.
Waits until they're back in her apartment before giving her
I think it's when they're leaving. When they're leaving, because they're all whole band is very happy that he's got the money out of the manager. And it's not it's that night. What about all... Anyway.
Well, the other thing he's done is he's got rid of him.
Yes.
He's made him in front of all these people in the bar who apparently count as witnesses. He's had him release them from their contract And that was the main issue. Not just, I mean, the money for the previous shows they've done, it's gone, I suppose. They've resigned to that.
Maybe.
But this show, they've done their hard set, several hours playing sort of 80s.
Pop songs behind like a chicken wire fence. Like, this is a very hard place to be playing very poppy songs. In fact, she interrupts a song halfway. She's like, this song is depressing. And then they switch to a different song. Bizarre. Every moment of this movie, I was like, what is happening? Okay, so... he goes backstage with the girls. He's reunited with Bev. Somebody delivers pizza. He doesn't know what pizza is.
Yeah.
By the way, in the previous scene, in the fight with the manager, he says, I'm going to give you space rabies.
Yeah.
And they all freak out. So, I guess they think he's an alien. It's accepted that he's an alien by these people. They're like, oh, we're going to get space rabies. This is a space alien.
Why would they buy that?
Why would they not? They think he's a kid in a suit like everyone else.
No one reacts to it.
Anyway, he doesn't know what pizza is somehow. Now, he comes from a planet which is identical to ours in every way. It has Flash Dance. It's called Splash Dance. But they don't have pizza.
Yeah.
So often when you get a movie that's bad like this, part of the problem is people don't react to supernatural things happening around them. And another thing is very inconsistent about reactions to this kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, please, why... It's not funny that he doesn't know what a pizza is. Just leave that line out. He can know what a pizza is.
It is left out of the novelization.
Okay. So now we go back to...
Tim Robbins' character shows up.
Yes.
And he sort of runs through all these... It's a bit of a bait and switch. He keeps telling Howard where he came from, and it's obviously wrong. But then he'll say, hey, I didn't believe it either. That's why I moved on to this theory. And it'll be another theory that's obviously wrong. And then finally, he announces that a duck feather showed up at the site of an industrial accident or a technological accident involving a laser spectroscope. And he needs a feather from Howard, and he plucks it, and then he runs off to take it.
Yeah, they steal that after. Yeah, he's going to take it to his big scientist friend.
Yes, and there's a kind of funny line. I think maybe the only line I laughed at in the whole movie, where he runs off to take a phone call. And his bandmate girlfriend says, Philzy! And he says, no sex now, I'm working.
Yeah.
And it's just so incongruous, because this guy's never getting any sex.
Yeah.
It's incongruous and kind of funny, I think.
Yeah. So then they go back to Bev's apartment. Now we get the craziest scene in the movie where Bev comes onto it in bed. And then she says he's joking. So he comes onto her. And then he says he was joking. And she comes on him really hard. And then she says she was joking. And... it's all very bizarre. And then Tim Robbins shows back up. He's got Jeffrey Jones in tow. Jeffrey Jones is the big scientist.
I just want to dwell, before we move on, I just want to dwell a little longer just on how grotesque
Oh, yeah.
this scene
But this
is.
isn't the most grotesque scene in the movie. I would argue that the tongue charger is the most grotesque scene in the movie.
No, I kind of like the tongue charger. Although, sorry.
Well, they're both gross.
It is gross, but I think that's more gross. By that point, the film's become a completely different film.
Yes, which we'll get to.
So here, I guess it's still kind of lodged in raunchy comedy.
Yeah.
Because Beverly just sort of tries to seduce him. She's quite scantily clad.
Yep.
In just her underwear, really.
Yep.
And she's flirting, unbuttoning his buttons, running her finger up his chest.
And then he gets a feather erection.
He gets a feather boner on
head.
top of his head. And he's really super uncomfortable, and I was really... He couldn't possibly have been as uncomfortable as I was. And I was even more uncomfortable when I learned later that it was probably a 12-year-old kid in the costume at the time.
Wow, okay, yep.
It's just so sleazy and unpleasant.
Yeah, I think it's not sleazy, it's weird.
It's meant to be funny.
It is meant to
not
be
funny,
yeah.
But it's also what everyone remembers about this film. Everybody hates it, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Lea Thompson, she has sex with a duck in here," and they're not having sex.
No, they never get that.
No one says sex, and in fact, they're just.
But he does say, "What about kids in a family?" or something like that. Which is a weird thing.
He's trying to get her to back off.
Yeah.
But it's just this is what everyone remembers about the film because it's just so odd.
It's crazy, really crazy,
uncomfortable. Anyway, Tim Robbins comes back with the scientist.
Yeah, Jeffrey Jones. He's playing this Hemming? It's one of the
Dr.
two.
Henning.
Dr. Henning or Dr. Hemming.
Who is the head of the research facility, and they confirm...
Oh, by the way, he also doesn't know what a synthesizer is. Because when he comes into her apartment the second time around, he starts fiddling around and he presses buttons and he's like shocked by music coming out of it.
This is Howard.
Well, he knows what a keyboard is. He doesn't know when he presses that.
Because he can play the keyboard, because he's a musician, apparently.
But okay.
They go back to the research facility.
Which is blown up. there's been an explosion in there.
Incidentally,
The laser has exploded.
I shouldn't keep talking about the novelization.
But he
There's
says... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's like a 7-page, another one of these insets about the facility, how it was founded. Like, it goes into this long history about how it was founded as a co-venture between a retired defense procurement general who used to work for the Department of Defense and a hippie woman that talked to plants who found, and he embezzled the money from the Department of the Defense to found the company, and then used his contacts within the Department of Defense to secure defense contracts. Photocopies of his plan to steal the money were found by the cleaning lady, who was the woman who talked to plants. That was her day job, talking to plants, but it was winter, so this just goes on and on. It's really funny. Anyway, there's been an explosion.
There's been an explosion. So the laser... So it's been revealed now that what happened was the laser beam malfunctioned in some way and brought Howard from another planet, not from another dimension.
Yes.
Which is what we had been thinking. You'd have to assume it was another dimension. They've got their own Mae West. They've got their own W.C. Fields.
Right.
They've got their own Rolling Stone. They've got Washington, D.C. You'd think, according to all the science fiction we've been reading for the past 100 years, this is another dimension. It's not. It's another planet where everything's exactly the same except they don't have pizzas.
So you've got parallel... Like, it's supposed to be a parallel dimension. So, parallel dimensions, I think people get it.
Yeah.
By this point, mid-80s.
Yeah.
The concept of parallel dimensions is well entrenched. We've had the Star Trek episodes with bearded Spock.
Yeah.
You know, Back to the Future 2 is not out yet, but that's going to have the evil timeline, which is kind of like a parallel dimension where things go differently. People get this idea, and yet that's not what's happening here.
No.
It's an egg-shaped planet which can't exist.
Yeah. An ancient planet where everything is the same countries, same everything. It's so... What a weird choice. Meanwhile, George Lucas is up in his office, snorting lines, I'm guessing. And is like, yeah, sure, this is good. This is how science fiction works. He doesn't come in, make any comment on the script or anything.
Yeah, this is Gloria Katz, who supposedly saved Star Wars with her script edits.
Yeah.
She wrote this.
Crazy. Okay, so...
I guess we're just not supposed to care because it's so fanciful.
By the way, this movie is an hour and 50 minutes long, and at this point, we're only at like 50 minutes. And I'm like, wait a second. Now suddenly we've got this laser movie that's going to start happening from this point, from the 1 hour.
We're halfway through the film, and the film now feels like it's starting.
Yes.
Because there's been this explosion. The Dr. Jennings, it's Dr. Jennings, I think.
Okay, yeah.
The cops arrive. They arrest Howard.
Why?
Yeah, because there's been an explosion. But why the cops?
Why arrest Howard?
I don't even... Why arrest Howard?
Why do they constantly want to arrest him after he escapes? Why are they like, we gotta catch this duck?
Yeah,
Why? They think he's a guy in a suit. They strip him. They can't find the zipper.
Well,
which I guess is maybe a nod to the comic.
I hate to do this. yeah, that's a complete lift from a similar scene in the comic. I think issue 2.
Yeah.
And it's not very funny. He's in his underwear. There are jarring transitions from the puppet to the person in the suit.
Yeah.
The puppet does not look anything like the suit with the animatronic head. They're completely differently proportioned. Yeah. It's really obvious when they cut from one to the other. So he's in his... I guess it's supposed to be funny because he's in his boxes.
Yeah.
But it's not. Then, and I hate to do this, they do steal a gun from a cop.
Yes.
Which is why I suppose there's a manhunt for them afterwards.
Okay.
To escape. They want to escape. I don't know why it's so urgent that they escape.
Yeah, why did she pull a gun on this cop?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Among many other things.
Yeah. So then they escape with Professor Jennings, who is really struggling with something. He's in a lot of pain.
Yes.
But he's the one that gets them out, and in a car. I don't know why. Why is it so urgent that they leave? Where are they going? I don't
know.
I guess because they want to...
Great question. Don't know. But they run away from the
I think because they're on the run now.
He's driving, yeah. He feels like something's growing inside him. He's very specific about it. He's like, something's happening to my organs.
Yeah.
Like,
my organs are melting. Something's terrible. There's a terrible evil has come. And Howard and Bev are just like, he's mental. Oh, yeah, just settle down. It's
he's
like, you're
a duck man from another planet.
You're a duck man that got zapped here by that very same laser.
And you're like, he's just acting, he just needs coffee.
That's the kid. It's so infuriating. They just keep saying, just go to sleep. He's good.
And he delivers.
I guess he ate a bad donut. And it's like, and there's a really long. This film at this point, the film becomes 75% car chases.
Yes.
Why are there so many car chases?
Jennings delivers a crazy line, which is, I am not Jennings, I am someone else. Someone else. That's very... If you were to try to explain that, hey, I'm not Jordan, I'm Kumar, I wouldn't say, I'm not Jordan, I'm someone else. That's weird. He's some being from another dimension. He doesn't, say who he is. Weird. Anyway, so he's growing inside this body. They stop at a diner to get him his coffee, so they're hoping he'll get well.
Cajun sushi.
Cajun sushi. Nothing on the menu is Cajun sushi, by the way. They don't get served any sushi.
I guess it's just funny to combine sushi with Cajun food.
Like many attempted jokes in this movie. That's the joke.
Completely. That's the joke.
And underline, that's the joke. They go in there. Jennings telepathically destroys a ketchup and mustard bottle. Why? Of all the things he could destroy, he stares at these two bottles and they blow up and they're like, uh-oh, something real's going on. Now we get
the waitress delivers eggs. Howard
freaks out because he's been served chicken eggs. He's disgusted by it. That seems weird to me.
It is kind of weird, but it doesn't make sense, I suppose. I guess I don't even want to rationalize it. But don't. We could, but just...
What kind of meat would they put on your plate that would be equivalent to, chicken eggs to a duck? Some kind of monkey?
Fetuses.
Monkey
fetuses.
Fetus. Okay.
Whatever.
He's offended. Get into a big brawl here, where suddenly his quack foo has disappeared.
Yeah.
He has to fight on countertops, which he did in the bar. Again, it's almost a repetition. He has to... Whenever he gets in a fight, he has to get up on the countertop. Gets on the countertop in this diner. There's a big fight. They try to cook him. They actually season him and start cooking him.
So weird.
He's freaking out. Meanwhile, Jennings had this key card, this special... It looks like a Game Boy, which he needs to activate the...
It's a very big clunky key card.
With a laser. And he wants to get that back. Because Jennings is a dark overlord of the universe, we've learned. He wants to summon his other friends down, and they need to possess bodies.
So,
I think they can't...
A bit like Superman 1978, he's been imprisoned in a phantom zone called the Nexus of Somnia, which has... Sominus, right.
Someone else? Sominus, maybe?
The Nexus of Sominus.
Okay.
Which, as we've discussed, is also a fancy resort home for...
Yes.
energy beings, but that's by the by. Yes, and he wants to bring down more of his kind to destroy the Earth.
Yes.
He's very vocal about his plan, so we're under no illusions as to what... In fact, Jennings was telling us before he'd even finished being possessed that the evil was a terrible danger to the Earth.
And they need to possess human bodies to grow in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he says that later on when he's driving away in a big truck.
Yeah.
With Bev. So there's this big fight. Jennings rescues Howard from the truckers and all the staff that are going to cook him.
Yeah.
This talking person.
He gets the key card back.
Yes, he gets the key card back. He dumps Howard, grabs Bev, and takes her away in this big rig. And they drive
because he wants to grow more aliens in Bev.
She says, "Why are you taking me?" He says, "We dark overlords." This is all just Jeffrey Jones doing this voice with very little effect. It's just a cool voice that he could do.
Okay,
probably got him the part.
He's looking rougher and rougher, by the way. There's a very Evil Dead vibe here with the forehead applications and the tongue power cord, which comes out very shortly.
It's a bit weird, but I didn't really have a problem with it. It's just
So he's getting low on energy. He needs energy, so he has this thing that comes out of his mouth, which looks very much like those creatures from Cronenberg's Shivers.
Yeah.
Really gross. Comes out, and you think it's going to be a tentacle attack on Bev, but it actually goes into the car charger. Their truck gets stopped at this police stop, which is for smog checks. Is this a real thing? Do they stop vehicles to check them for their pollution output?
The novelization... I know I keep talking about it. The novelization specifically says, you may think that smog checks are usually performed at service stations, at petrol stations, or in mechanical workshops and supervised by state professionals, and are not things that just occur on highways. And you would be right. But in this case, one is happening on a highway.
Right, okay. So I
should point out, sorry, you mentioned the makeup. The makeup artist for the film were Tom Berman and Barry Dryden Berman. Okay. Husband wife team, apparently. Tom Berman, apparently a well-known makeup effects man, took this job, Howard the Duck, because he had been asked to do Star Wars and turned it down because he thought it sounded stupid. He thought it sounded like some Buck Rogers nonsense and he didn't want any part of it. And then, of course, regretted it.
I feel like whatever studio made this also had they made it because they had turned down Star Wars.
That's 100... Well, this is how this got made. I mean, spoilers for when I talk about production. I don't have a lot to say about the production, actually, but this is... George Lucas's name is what got this film made.
Yeah, because this studio had turned down Star Wars 10 years earlier and like, shit, we're not going to do that.
Yeah,
Make that mistake again. Here comes Cocaine George with a new movie that he wants to make. And I bet you those guys read comics in the 70s, Lucas, Spielberg, those guys were into comic books and they would have read Howard the Duck and liked
it. That's right. George Lucas wanted to make the film from the early 70s at least.
Yeah.
Because he was into the comics.
Yeah. Believe it.
Apparently he wanted John Landis to direct it.
Oh my god, that would have been something else.
He just one look at the script and
of course.
No.
Of course. So now they blow up all these cars. It's lots of chase stuff. Meanwhile, I think the cops have shown up at the diner.
Yes, because it's been a huge fight and explosion.
Right.
So they show up.
Then there happens to be an airplane behind the diner? Okay, so there's something from the book.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Why is there an airplane behind the diner? Please tell us, Ellis Wiener.
Alice Weiner says, has Howard say, a plane, Howard said. He looked worried. But what's it doing here? In the middle of a parking lot for some roadside cafe? I don't know, Phil said. And with a touch of reverence in his voice, that even he, stalwart empiricist that he was, might have conceded was not without its religious dimension, he said, I guess we're just very, 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 very lucky.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So then we get airplane chase, where Howard is flying this thing, not Ralphie, what was his name? Stewie? What was the...
Filzy. Yeah.
So Filzy...
Well, Filzy's hands are handcuffed together.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
Because he shows up in a squad car.
Yes, that's right.
Because they've come straight from the explosion at the at the lab.
Okay. Meanwhile, Jennings needs more power, so they go to a nuclear power plant. He just kind of walks through there. He blows up couple of doors, and he goes right into the reactors. No problem.
Yeah, they join a congressional tour.
Yes. He doesn't look.
He looks really rough, and someone says these junkets really take the politicians on these junkets really take a beating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a joke. And then he walks into the reactor.
I've got to stop talking about the novelization. One more time. This whole sequence is about 20 pages long in the novelization, and half of it is spent on a character portrait of the sleazy public relations guy that is leading the tour, who has like one line in the film.
Wow.
And he's got this whole backstory in the novelization. Anyway, that joke is slightly expanded. The joke about the politicians on junkets taking a beating is slightly expanded in the novelization to say they tour in facilities all day and sleeping with beautiful broads all night.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, he walks into a reactor, he absorbs all the energy from it, goes back to Bev. You'd think he'd be radioactive, like melting stuff.
He's absorbed it all.
He's absorbed it all. Then there's a race. Both parties are trying to get back to the lab, which is, I guess, like Fermilab, where this laser is.
Yep.
Jeffrey Jones / our Dark Overlord of the Universe puts the key card into the laser, activates it. He's got Bev tied up. Howard comes in. They got to go in. Oh, and then Filzy is like, "Oh, there's like weapons and stuff in there. There's a locked door. They can't get in. How do we get in?"
Well,
Howard kicks it.
Yeah.
He kicks the door. Then they get in, and there's a padlock in the inner door, and they're stuck. They're like, "Well, we can't get this padlock on." I'm like, "You just kicked that door open."
Yeah. Why can't Howard use
this? This is the same scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They get in there. There's a neutron cannon in there, experimental thing that the government had. Howard comes out. This stuff is.
I'm sorry. The last one.
Okay.
For the last one, the neutron cannon gets a whole backstory.
Okay.
It's developed by an unnamed president who's like but it's Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, of course, because of Star Wars.
Yeah, and
the Star Wars program.
It's his Star Wars thing,
yeah.
And it says that he was watching Saturday morning. He watches Saturday morning cartoons every morning and eating fistfuls of
jelly beans.
In this case, cereal, sugar cereal, out of the box and shoveling it in.
Okay,
and then he's watching his favourite Saturday morning cartoon, and he sees a neutron cannon on it, and then he summons his aides and says, "We have to make the neutron cannon." And then there's this whole sequence where it just talks about all the vested interests that are skimming money off the project, how the public is convinced that we need a neutron. It's a satire of Star Wars. How the public is convinced that we need a neutron gun, how the Senate and how Congress is convinced that they need a neutron gun, how the Pentagon is convinced that we need a neutron gun. It just goes on and on and on and on. It's just this long aside. There are just these endless asides, and then we go back to the neutron gun.
Okay.
In the scene.
So the laser's been turned on, and these aliens are coming down through the portal. The thing I want to say about this is all very boring.
Yep.
The last hour of this movie is so dull. The first hour is like crazy. Like, I can't believe how weird and stupid this movie is. Yep. Second hour is just boring. Yep. So many chases. They get to. By the way, all the stuff with the dark overlord inside different shows is very Ghostbusters, and then we get this neutron gun, which is very Ghostbusters. Very Ghostbusters. All the stuff is.
The effects look a lot like Ghostbusters.
Yes.
It's just very much like Ghostbusters. And the end. I don't understand the end. The car chases are so boring.
Yeah.
And about half of the second hour of the film is car chases.
Yes.
Or chasing the ultralight.
Yeah.
You know, is it going to crash into this bridge? Whoop, goes up at the last second, you know.
Yeah.
It's just so boring.
It just goes on and on.
And, you know, and Howard and Filsey just trade uninspired barbs.
Yes. And there's like lots of lines from movies that are like from better movies, or like, of all the diners in all the world, you have to walk in this one. Like lines like that just come up again and again, especially from Filsey.
Yeah.
Okay, then after they blast Jeffrey Jones, he reemerges as this giant creature done in stop motion. And why? Okay, and then these aliens are coming through, and they're like, you got to destroy the laser beam to stop the aliens coming through. But then you won't be able to get home, Howard. And Howard blows up the. I'm like, why didn't you just turn off the machine? Surely there's an off button. Why do we have to destroy it and get him stuck here? Because there was a contract for 2 more movies. But
that's
anyway.
Right. That's exactly
They're
right.
like, okay, blow it up, and then the final scene is the band playing, and now Howard is their manager. By the way, I said I only remember the condom. Actually, this song has been stuck in my head for 35 years. Howard, da-da. That song's been playing over and over again in my mind. And then that's it. Howard comes out on stage by accident, and he plays a guitar. My son's first comment, Ashton, he said his guitar tone is terrible. I was like, yeah, it's like a toy guitar. It sounds awful. But even if it wasn't it's not the actual sound coming out of the machine, they just made it sound so bad. Anyway, none of that's important. It's just kind of he's like their manager now. Nobody seems to care that a duck is their manager, or maybe we're in a world now where it's accepted that we have an alien on Earth. I guess that has to be it. And then him and Bev kind of hug in the corner off stage, right? Roll credits. The movie was still going. Like, the credits started and they were playing their song. I was like, why isn't this over already? We've been here for an hour and 45 minutes at this stage.
It was so long.
Please end it. Oh yeah, Jeffrey Jones had like freezing eye beams. Why did I write that? I don't know. Just he developed more powers as he emerged from his...
Fine. I think with those freezing beams, it's to prepare you for...
Yeah, he needs to keep those people alive. So But he only had 2 people, and there were like a bunch of them coming through the portal. How's this going to work?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, there was heaps of them coming. But, yeah, Howard stops them. Yep. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, last time I bring up the novelization, I promise. So, Ellie Wiener. So, I forgot to ring the bell for the National Lampoon Dune. Where it's about the beer must flow instead of the spice must flow. The last time I will mention the book is to read probably my favourite bit.
Okay.
Where he mentions a truth already divined by the alert reader that a real spectroscope sends out nothing, but in fact is used for receiving, for analysing incoming light, and that therefore, let's not shrink from unpleasant truths, all caps. The entire story of Howard the Duck could be said to lack a certain degree of credibility.
Wow.
This is close to the end of the novel, and he's given up on hinting that there's a problem with the story, and he just comes right out and says it. Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, what's your trivia on this one?
Okay, so I have heaps of trivia. Let's work through it.
Okay.
Alright, so first of all, how did this film do? Okay. This film did not do well.
Yep.
Although it's a box office flop. So this film is famous for being a dud. Famous dud.
Yeah.
However, it did lose money because it made $38 million both domestically and internationally. Its budget was, and it's hard to get an exact figure, somewhere between 30 and 37 million.
Okay.
So, not a massive flop. So, by that logic, it's sort of made back its budget, but that budget doesn't include marketing, and this film had a lot of marketing.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it definitely wasn't a success.
Okay.
And it may have led to the sale of Pixar to Steve Jobs.
Oh, yes, I'm vaguely familiar with this.
Because it didn't do well, and George Lucas, I think, was getting divorced, he needed to liquidate some of his assets, which included the effects studio that would become Pixar, which he sold at this point to Steve Jobs for $10 million, which is what led down the track to all sorts of better films than Howard the Duck. So in that sense, Howard the Duck had a positive kind of outcome. So now I will talk about the production. Okay. So as I said earlier, Lucas, I presumably was a fan of the comic, or had at least seen the comic, wanted to make the film from at least the early 1970s, wanted John Landis to direct it, but it was envisioned as being an animated film at first.
Okay.
So, and apparently, now, we've been pretty hard on the writers, Katz and Huyck, but they wrote a script originally, which apparently didn't explain where Howard came from at all, and just starts with him as a detective in Hawaii.
Wow!
Which just would have, and so much of what's dumb about this movie is how does Howard get here and why don't people react to him this consistently, and this plot about him getting back in the Dark Overlords is all really stupid. I wonder what the first draft looked like, where he just pops up in medias res and he's already working as a detective. And maybe it would be something like Coneheads, where no one reacts to the fact that he looks different to anybody. I'm curious as to what that would have turned out like. But it wasn't to be. So this is, now we have studio interference. The studio didn't want that.
Yeah.
They wanted an origin story.
Okay.
We gotta know where he came from. It's gotta be like Superman. Where's the craft he comes down in? Something like that. And also they didn't want an animated film because they wanted a summer hit. They wanted it out in summer of 1986, which means that this film had a 7-month shoot.
Okay.
Which also explains why it looks so crap, because this is quite a rushed shoot.
7-month turnaround. The shoot would have been like...
7-month turnaround sort of from start to finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, from pre to post.
Yeah.
Really quick.
Yeah.
He was then, at that point, they were going to do computer generate Howard.
Whoa. Okay.
But much too early for that to have been effective, I think. So this is going to be kind of like a Jar Jar Binks. So maybe have an actor there on set to play Howard. Here's another reason why the film doesn't work. They didn't cast the voice until post-production.
Yep.
So Howard's lines are being delivered by the actors in the suit, or just by someone standing around on set. This is not like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the actor that did Roger Rabbit's voice was always on set where Roger was, and then so that the actors could react in real time. They could act with one another. Lea Thompson has gone on the record as saying a big reason why she reckons that a lot of the jokes would have landed better if they could have been interacting with the guy that did the Howard voice in real time. The comic timing would have been better.
Yeah.
It would have been more organic. Instead, there were 2 little people who performed as Howard. Ed Gale, who was then 21, who also went on to play Chucky in the Chucky suit in the Chucky movies, who is currently under investigation for soliciting sex from miners.
Isn't Jeffrey Jones a real bad guy,
Which makes him the one of 2 people in this film who have been charged with soliciting sex from minors. Jeffrey Jones, as well, was found to have possessed child pornography.
Oh, is that right?
And to have, he had, and to have approached the boy to appear in photographs naked. Okay. So
brutal.
Yeah, the curse of Howard the Duck. The other was Jordan Prentice, who was 12 years old at the time.
Okay.
They wanted someone small, but someone who could also do all of Howard's acrobatics. And basically they wanted the impossible, because as Ed Gale himself pointed out in an interview I read online...
It's very difficult in that suit, I imagine.
It does. So he says, I went in for a meet and greet. They were looking for someone 2 foot 10 inches to 3 foot 2 inches, and I was 2 inches above their ceiling. I told them that they won't find someone that short, proportioned, and agile. The smaller you get, the more disproportioned you get. Then we have a quote from Willard Huyck, who said, we decided the next best thing would be casting a young little person. So they cast Jordan Prentice, who later went on to appear, I think, in American Pie movies.
Okay.
I was 12 at the time, and had yet to receive my current 4'1" stature. They were going around North America meeting with as many little people as they could, so I went to Toronto to meet with one of the producers and a casting person. We had a conversation. I jumped up and down on the hotel bed to show my mobility, and they said, "You're a little too tall." Being too tall is something that has never happened to me in my life otherwise. Several months passed and we received a call asking if I would still be interested in playing the part. I heard they had hired 3 8-year-old dwarves to play Howard, and it turned out they couldn't do it. They weren't mature enough, they were frightened. One of them even peed their pants while working in the costume.
Wow.
So just a kind of horrible production.
Yeah.
Really? Oh yeah, as I said, Jordan Prentice, they sort of split it as evenly as possible. Jordan Prentice could only work so many hours because he was a minor.
Yeah.
So Ed Gale is in the suit a lot, but Jordan was in the suit in some of the scenes where there was that heavy petting / flirting with Lea Thompson. He said, Jordan Prentice said, I didn't really have a problem with it, but my guardian did.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
If you like, I can talk a little bit about the suits. As you said, the animatronics are not too bad. The guy that worked on it was someone called Tim Rose, who said it was the most difficult professional job he'd ever had, but the one that he was most proud of. It was the first self-contained animatronic suit.
Right.
So earlier ones, like Yoda or E.T., had been either animatronic or had had a person inside them, but there'd always been external controls.
Yes.
There'd always be wires and pipes and all sorts of things coming out the back, and you had to shoot them a certain way. Howard, on the other hand, the brain that controlled the animatronics was in the rump, the prominent kind of duck rump that he's got sticking out the back. The suits were moulded to Ed Gale and Jordan Prentice's body. I can read a quote from Jordan Prentice. They moulded my entire body like they would do for a cast if you fell off a ski lift or something. They made moulds for my hand and feet. The feathers on my head and hands were real feathers that had to be glued down and preened regularly throughout the day to make them keep them looking proper. I had gloves up half my wrists and fake legs in the shape of duck feet past my ankles. There was a bib for the chest area and a plastic skull-shaped thing that had been moulded from my head, with a series of servo connections on the side to work the eyes and mouth. Tim Rose, who was the animatronics puppeteer, who, as I've already quoted, he said, I got involved because of my previous work I did on Return of the Jedi. I helped build the creatures and I played Admiral Akbar. So they were having problems with the duck, so George called for me, so George using his contacts. I was in England but went to California to help out. The main reason I wanted to do the movie was because Howard was the leading man, but he was a puppet. At that time, nothing like that had been done before. Needing to keep a character alive and lovable for the length of a movie was a tremendous challenge, one which arguably the puppet didn't meet, in my opinion. Alright, so as I said, they didn't cast the voice until post-production.
Yeah.
So these these little people actors were often doing the lines, even though they weren't, they were actors.
Yeah.
But, one of them was 12, and the other one was 21, and perhaps not polished.
Sure.
And a big part of this should have been, they were delivering the lines, so this is really kind of like hamstrung the way that the performance needed to be later on.
Yeah.
So, when shooting was finished, they auditioned a number of actors. So John Cusack was interviewed, Martin Short was interviewed, and Robin Williams.
Recorded 3 days, apparently.
He did. So, and it was like Popeye all over again. He really struggled, and I think he'd learned his lesson this time. So I have a quote from the guy that ended up playing Howard, Chip Zien. He said, "What I was told was that by the 3rd day, Robin said, I can't do this. It's insane. I can't get the rhythm of this. I was being confined. I am being handcuffed in order to match the flapping duck's bill." So he couldn't, his style is improvisational. And because the performance was already done, the duck's bill had already moved, the lines had already been delivered, he had to match that, and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And unlike Popeye, this time he walked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they cast Chip Zien, who I think at that stage was a Broadway actor.
Okay.
He signed up for 3 movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he'd signed up, George Lucas, he'd signed up because of George Lucas. He was really excited to be in this. Everyone was really excited to be in it at the beginning. Lea Thompson too. She was really thrilled to be cast. It was a big deal. He said, I was supposed to be Howard the Duck as a fill-in host on Entertainment Tonight. I signed a contract to be the voice of AT&T. I had ancillary rights for talking Howard the Duck dolls. However, as the film got closer to opening, he noticed that he wasn't getting any more calls. And also, he wasn't invited to the premiere.
Wow.
Neither was Ed Gale, the actor who'd spent the most time in the suit. It seems the reason they did this was that they wanted Howard to be the character.
Sure.
And that if you had the guy doing the voice or the guy in the suit, people would have been focused on them and less interested in the character of Howard the Duck. They needn't have bothered.
Yeah.
Really, they needn't have bothered, and they should have just let these blokes go to the bloody premiere, because that's a really crappy way to treat your stars, arguably. And yeah, so...
Well, I wanted to add, because you didn't mention it, that Tori Amos auditioned for the role of Bev.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently.
And
or maybe not necessarily Bev, but one of the girls in the band, at least.
Yeah.
So, I saw an interview with her on Leno, and she mentioned that she had auditioned for Howard the Duck for the band, and it wasn't clear if she meant Bev or not, but then you go on some websites, they say she tried out for Bev. But... interesting thing in that Leno bit is that he didn't mention that he was up for the part of Phil's.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scuttlebutt, I suppose because this film's such a famous flop, there's a lot of kind of like competing information. Mm-hmm. So I've tried to rely on two sources which were based on... So one's called Howard the Duck, The Oral History, which is from 2016, where they interviewed a lot of these people I've been quoting. They interviewed Ed Gale. They interviewed the writers and director, they interviewed Jordan Prentice, they interviewed Lea Thompson, they interviewed Jeffrey Jones, and they interviewed the animatronics guy and the makeup guy. It's really interesting, maybe we might put the link in the show notes. The other one I read was Howard the Duck Turns 35, stars revisit Notorious Bomb amid new fervour for Marvel character, July 26, 2021. And that was an interview with just Lea Thompson and Chip Zien, who did the voice. And that might be an effective segue into where Howard the Duck is now. Right, because he's reappeared, hasn't he?
Yes.
Just cameos, really, so far.
Yeah.
He was in the 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. First in an after-credits sequence.
Yeah.
And in the second one in a brief shot in a bar, where he says something along the lines of, if you don't go duck, you're shit out of luck, or something like that.
Yeah, voiced by Seth Green.
Voiced by Seth Green, yeah.
And he's in one shot in Endgame at the final big battle.
Yes, he is. That's right. And... Lea Thompson, who these days does quite a lot of work behind the camera as a director.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if she's directed a feature film yet, but she
does a lot of TV.
She does a lot of TV. She has been pitching a Howard the Duck Marvel movie.
Right.
She's very interested in doing it, actually. She's tweeted it several times over the last few years, and with herself as the director.
Yeah, I'm into it.
The story would be that Howard is stranded on Earth after that scene at Iron Man's funeral.
Right, okay.
Apparently she commissioned art and all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
But Marvel passed.
Losers.
Just tells you everything you need to know about Marvel.
Yeah.
Also, there was a Howard the Duck animated series in the works for a while for Hulu.
Okay.
However, that was cancelled in early 2020. The person working on that was Kevin Smith.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was cancelled, I think, when Hulu was bought by Disney, I think. Maybe they felt like it clashed with their vision for the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
I don't really know why. And neither does Kevin Smith, for that matter. He was just told, well, you're done.
Yeah, I'm right. Should we do our ratings?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, the comic book.
I like the comic book a lot. Yeah, I think it's really good.
Yep, not much else to say about it. Like I said,
it was... we discussed, yeah. It's like a better flaming carrot.
Yeah, it's pretty sharp, smart, funny, just funny the whole way through.
Very
interesting.
funny.
You really never know what it's gonna be issue to issue.
Yeah, it has a... Yeah, it really ticks all the boxes. It's funny, it's effective satire a lot of the time, even all these decades later. I still respond to it. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Most, it has a kind of like a really surreal, almost kind of character. It's fanciful, but with a core consistency of Howard and his observations of
that's the
craziness of like the
mid-70s America.
Mid-70s America.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. The movie.
Nope. This movie's a disaster.
Yeah. It really is. I do think it's worth watching the first hour for how crazy and how misguided it is. I think the second hour is absolute bore town.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't even... Like, this film really sucks. It sucks a lot. And it sucks in a lot of ways. As you pointed out, it sucks because it's boring.
Yeah.
We've talked about crap movies on this podcast before, and I've voted yay because you just... It's something you could watch while playing board games or something. Like a party movie.
Yeah.
This one is not a party movie. This is either dull or cringe-worthy. It's not so bad, it's good. Yeah, you've got... So... It fails on that level. Tone-wise, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Is this a raunchy... Is this like Porky's?
Yeah.
Is this with a duck?
Yeah.
Is it family fun? A lot of people took their kids to this movie. Because Chip Zien wasn't invited to the premiere, he ended up just seeing it at a cinema down the road. And apparently, when he went into the cinema, some people were there with their kids. And he actually went up to these people and said, I don't think you should be watching this. This is the movie that he started, incidentally. He's telling parents with their children, I don't think you need to be. You shouldn't really be here watching this movie with your kids. You should probably take them out of here. It's like, who are you? Oh, I'm in it. Or is it, or is it a dark kind of like sci-fi film?
That comes up too.
That's the second half.
Yeah, that's right. The alien vibes when he's driving around, like this is like Alien, Ghostbusters. It's and Evil Dead. It's all kind of in there, and Shivers.
Yeah, and Shivers with the tongue.
With the tongue.
It's a mess.
Bizarre. Absolutely weird. So weird. Okay, so on adaptation, I just want to read this one quote from Gloria Katz.
Brilliant.
So remember that issue 1 opens with, as I've mentioned twice, Howard trying to kill himself. And Gloria Katz's statement is, it's a film about a duck from outer space. It's not supposed to be an existential experience.
I saw that quote too. And
that says it all.
Yeah, it really does.
That's like, this source material is crud. What we're making is better, is what that says. And
yes,
it's missed every
completely misunderstood
point.
it.
I mean, it's not fish out of water. There's no outsider observations. It's not funny in any way. It's so unlike the experience of reading the comic.
Completely agree. Yeah. They play it too straight. They remove some of the more surreal elements.
Yeah.
And Howard, of course, has had the rough edges sanded off. He's much nicer,
Yes.
so he's more boring.
Yeah.
He's bland. He's neither obnoxious enough to be funny nor goofy enough to be fun. He's just kind of delivers these stale wisecracks at times.
Yeah.
So I think you've pretty much summed it up.
Okay.
I just want to rewind a little bit. So I mentioned earlier Ali Willis, who helped compose some of the songs for Cherry Bomb. And this is why I vote nay for the film. This pretty much sums it up. A film has to be disastrously bad in a different way to be kitsch. As in, they didn't have enough money to spend on production. If someone slams the door, the walls shake. Howard the Duck wasn't bad in that sense. It was just fairly boring. It was reminiscent of a lot of films that were out at the time, but not as good. People were really getting into special effects then, so the Duck just seemed too cheap and not in a funny way.
Yeah.
I think, and you were just saying, like, it's like Evil Dead, it's like Ghostbusters. It has these common elements, but it's just crap.
Yeah.
I will say one thing. It is a bad film, and it didn't make a lot of money. It didn't make money. But also, I think part of the reason why everyone remembers this film as being so bad is partly because George Lucas had such a role in getting it made.
Yes.
And we associate George Lucas with blockbuster success.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones, obviously Star Wars.
Yeah.
So the fact that he made this terrible film at the height of his powers is something that we take a certain delight in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, please rate, review, like, subscribe, join us on Facebook. Please join our Patreon. We still need patrons to keep the lights on. Oh, is there something else in there? No, I said Facebook.
Did you do the foursome?
Yeah, I did
Right.
like, rate, review, subscribe.
Good.
Is that it?
Good.
Okay, next week we've got another anniversary. This time it's the 45th anniversary of Superman 1978.
I did throw in a couple of references.
Yeah, it's certainly not in oblivion, I don't think. Well, maybe it is a little bit, but I think what we're going to read is Superman number 300, which was the closest anniversary issue to the movie's release. It was like mid-70s.
Okay.
And Superman versus Muhammad Ali, which also came out the same year.
I can't wait.
Yeah.